This is House Planning Help episode 79. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're wanting to construct a new home or to renovate an existing property. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century. My personal goal is to create an energy efficient home before I turn 40 in August 2016. And coming up in this session, we're heading to Northern Ireland. My guest is Mark Chesney from Beam Vacuum and Ventilation, and we're going to be looking at how ventilation in the home has evolved. Shall we get going? I thought you were due another update on the premiere of the House Planning Help documentary because it's getting ever closer. Exciting news, certainly from my perspective. I've been darting all over London, Bristol, Oxford, Cambridge, Gloucester, Cirencester, Hertford, Hereford and Cropthorne, but that's one that you haven't heard of because it's a small village. This is all to do with the filming of the documentary, and now that is behind us. Yes, we're moving into the edit in the next week or so. At the time of recording, it's about 10 days till the premiere, and that's why I wanted to emphasise again, it's your opportunity to get there. I've actually been doing the VIP invites as well, which is another side that's quite exciting. These are significant journalists or influencers in the environmental space, and there's a whole heap of them. So even if one or two of these people turn up, I'm telling you, it's going to be very exciting to have them there. And I think that you will enjoy that because it's a fairly small group of people. We're going to be under 120, 130, around about that mark. We've sold over half of the tickets. So if you'd like to come, it's open to you. You just need to be available on the date, which is Thursday, the 4th of December, 2014. It's at the Mildmay Community Centre in Islington, which is itself a retrofit. Another reason for going that you might want to take a look around and see how on earth have they done this. So if you want to come, I'll put the details again into the show notes, houseplanninghelp.com/79. Let's get into today's interview, and it's actually with one of the corporate sponsors of the documentary. I thought, I've been trying to organise this one for a while. Mark Chesney, he's the Installation and Services Manager at Beam Vacuum and Ventilation. So we're going to have a chat with him about ventilation because it's been a while since we've talked about this. It's very relevant, and so we'll be emphasising those main points yet again. I started by asking him about his work and what goes on at Beam.
My background is in the building trade. We are involved in ventilation installations throughout the UK and Ireland, and we have a 15-year history with installing new products, ventilation products, into new and existing homes.
And do you live in a house that's right on the cutting edge, or have you managed to bring this into your personal life?
No, I don't live in a cutting edge house at all. My home's 15 years old, and it has one or two of the ventilation products installed. Ventilation products are for all homes, whether they be 50-year-old bungalows or very new, modern, airtight buildings.
Well, the reason I've got you on today is because I thought that it would be a good opportunity to revisit ventilation. And also I'm going to throw in some new questions that I have about it as we go through. So I wanted to start on a side of ventilation that I hadn't really discussed before, and that is ventilation of the structure. Because as I understand it, there are three different parts of a house that you could ventilate: the living space, the structure, and when you come to deal with stoves and open fireplace, etc. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it would fall under three different forms. The mechanical systems would be ventilating the inside of the home for the people that live in the home. So you're getting air change inside the dwelling. Completely different is the air combustion for the combustible appliances, your fires, stoves, etc. And the building itself needs to breathe, and that's done at the build, at the new build, where you allow air transfer routes for the roof space to breathe and the building itself to breathe, especially with timber frame products.
So how would you do that? With an air brick?
Well, if, for instance, the roof space, you would have an air transfer route beneath the roof itself. You would have air gaps in the cavity walls, and generally just allows the building itself to breathe in and breathe out.
And is it doing this just by blowing the air around effectively?
Yes, well, in the construction phase, the air transfer routes would allow the building itself to breathe naturally, so that there is no mechanical form of ventilating the actual structure.
And presumably that has been historically the case as well, that whole buildings would have worked that same way.
Yes, that's the way. That was the traditional way buildings were designed and built. In the past, there was no need for mechanical systems to provide fresh air into the internal dwelling or extraction away from it, because there was so much natural leakage within the actual timber frame of the house or the block construction. It's only as houses have become more airtight, better insulated, that the need for mechanical extraction and mechanical supply of air to the home for the people within the house to breathe more easy and allow for better air change.
And why have we gone down that route, increasing insulation and airtightness for someone that this might be a new idea to?
Well, if you consider houses from the 1970s and 80s and before that, the air tightness levels were very poor, natural leakage was great, and the open of windows was the normal to ventilate the house for the people living in it. As houses have become more airtight in the late 90s and since the turn of the century, it's all down to the cost of heating the homes, considering that heating the home has become 5 times, 6 times dearer than it was 15, 20 years ago.
And it's having that level of control. So looking at the different ways that we could approach this, I'm assuming that mechanical ventilation with heat recovery is the ultimate, but perhaps we could work through some of the others that I've seen. But particularly recently, I saw a house that was being retrofitted that had trickle vents put in and was using extract fans. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of going down that route?
The cheapest way to ventilate a home is via natural leakage and openable windows. That doesn't cost anything to put in place, but you've no control over the cold ingress from outside or the heat loss to the outside. Thus, the heat in the home is lost a lot quicker, and you've no control over the amount of air transfer that you get.
And I'm assuming that there was a stage when we didn't even think about ventilation, and then perhaps we did think about ventilation, but it was this natural ventilation, even though we weren't still controlling it very well.
Yes, that's correct. On the stepping stone to ventilation, and I suppose that the top step would be MVHR, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. The stepping stone from natural ventilation with openable windows through to trickle vents and independent extract fans, which has become the norm from the late 80s and early 90s. More modern types of ventilation have been mechanical extract systems, positive input systems, and ultimately MVHR systems, mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, which are used and recognised to be an essential part of an airtight, well-insulated home.
Because it's quite a blurry line, isn't it, as to when you might use mechanical ventilation in terms of, obviously if you're very airtight, it makes total sense. But if we start to go up to where it might be 3 air changes per hour or perhaps 4, do you still use extract fans at that level for comfort purposes, even though it might be using more energy to run these fans?
Well, that's an important question. When you're talking about 3 to 4 air changes an hour, that's for intermittent extract fans, which are only run for 15 to 20 minutes, giving you a high air change rate in a small space for a small amount of time. For instance, if you were to ventilate a domestic home, with 4 air changes an hour, you would have struggled greatly to keep heat within that home. With a new build, whether it be timber frame or block built home or equivalent, the recognised air change rate would be something just slightly less than half an air change per hour. A passive house, for instance, is even less. It's down to 0.3 air changes per hour. This is confused sometimes with the air permeability rate, which is the designed air permeability rate for the fabric of the building, which is 0.6 metres squared per metre cube per hour.
It does get technical, doesn't it, when we start having all these numbers flying around?
It does, but if you can set up a new home to have 1 air change every 2 hours in the domestic situation, and you heat the home, you will limit and reduce or eliminate the amount of condensation, eliminate mould, and provide a fresh, filtered indoor air climate.
So that's always what we're aiming to do. It's really down to health issues.
primarily, ventilation systems, no matter what form, are there to provide fresh, filtered, changed air into the dwelling and for the people living within the home.
So are there choices in terms of filtering that air as well, or do all products filter the air?
Most products will filter the air to some degree. There's obviously different levels and different levels of filtration available. Mechanical heat recovery ventilation systems should and mostly would have a filtration level of at least F4 and potentially F7, which is a pollen rated filter. But F4 would be the industry norm.
And what else might you have in that system? Is it just filtering the air, drawing in the fresh air from the outside? Are there any other considerations?
Well, the considerations are the amount of people living within the home, the air tightness of the dwelling, and also is the dwelling well enough insulated that it deems an MVHR system is the suitable product for that home. Sometimes less airtight homes, older homes with a retrofit which can't achieve a great level of airtightness. Some of the simpler products, the MEV systems or the PIV systems, will be an approved alternative to a complete MVHR system.
Another aspect that I wanted to talk about, which may just be on the border of this discussion, but we've mentioned ventilation. If we're talking about a very airtight home and you're looking at heating or cooling that air, it's often in a passive house, for example, something that you wouldn't necessarily do. You'd hope that the structure of the house would mean that you wouldn't have to heat or cool the air. But if you do, what would your options be there?
It's a common mistake that ventilation systems with heat recovery, because of the last two words in its title, will provide a heating system for the home. And that's not the case. If you're building an approved, accredited passive house using the ventilation system with heat recovery and a primary heat source, you can then sustain the heat within that dwelling a lot easier than you could if it was just a traditional build. A traditional build, even with a low air permeability rating and high levels of insulation, will most definitely need a primary heating source for that house.
So what is your main business then at Beam?
At Beam, we have been installing central vacuum systems into the Irish and British markets since 1977. We are a domestic company with a commercial and industrial side to our business. In the last 15 years, we have moved into ventilation systems, and we now combine the installation of both. And while the two products are completely individual, we feel that a central vacuum system and depending on the form of ventilation system, provide both clean air and clean home to the people and the occupants of the new dwelling or existing dwelling.
So that's obviously a separate element to it, but what is a central vacuum system, and does it link up at all with the ventilation in some respect? Are you making use of what's already there, or is it not that case at all?
No, it's a completely standalone product. The central vacuum system is a ducted system with the vacuum unit, the power unit, the motor itself being located in the non-living area of the home, either the utility room or a garage or store. It removes all the dust pollutants from the home and provides no recycled dust into the dwelling. It's a proven fact that asthma and allergy sufferers see dramatic decreases in their symptoms if they have a central vacuum system installed. The two products are completely separate, but the motto of clean air and clean home combine together to provide a better indoor climate for everybody, but especially those who suffer from any allergies or asthma sufferers.
And how does it actually work? What are the components for the user?
The vacuum system, as I said, the motor itself is located in the non-living area of the home, so all the noise and the dust is removed to that area. All that is provided through the house, the dwelling, is a hose, a lightweight hose, which is inserted into a socket, not unlike an electrical socket, and the vacuum commences from there, and the dust is then drawn and removed back to the one point, for instance, in the garage.
And there are multiple sockets like this throughout the house that you would incorporate during the construction?
Yeah, depending on the size of the home, yeah, you're talking somewhere between 5 and 7 wall sockets throughout the dwelling.
And then you just empty it in the same way that you would a normal vacuum.
Yes, there's the plastic bin which can be emptied like any other vacuum cleaner.
As we get towards the end, I just want to ask a few questions about your situation where you are in Northern Ireland, and what are the houses like out there? How would you describe them? Are they getting better?
Yes, most definitely. The construction business has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and as each year passes by, you notice and you see more airtightness products being made available and better built homes, and all within the industry are recognising this and taking on board those improvements. Houses that were built 15 years ago, for instance, they wouldn't have been built airtight at all. There would have been very few of the construction people on site would have given it any thought. Each different phase of the construction on a new build in today's marketplace, every part of that house has been built airtight, and everybody contributes to that.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Mark. It's been fantastic to get some answers to our questions here, so I appreciate that. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks for having us.
You can peruse today's show notes. They're online, ready and waiting, houseplanninghelp.com/79. We've summarised the main points. We've got photos of the ventilation systems and some other aspects that we've been talking about today, and links back to beam, vacuum and ventilation. Thank you very much to Mark for his time. We're going stateside for the iTunes reviews. Well, almost. I'm not quite sure how this has happened because I've been chatting to James Lurs on Twitter, and I know that he's based in New Zealand, but somehow perhaps his wife is American. I can't remember. So technically an American review here. Must listen and great back catalogue. If you're interested in building, renovating, DIY, or looking for a greener way to live, this podcast is a must. Ben dives into the world of building and renovating with the key goal of finding better ways to do it. There is more than one way to skin a cat, and there are even more ways to build a structure. This podcast looks deep into the different methods of construction all around the world and highlights the best practices with guests that are experts in their field. Across most of the world, building standards are just that. Standard. To build a house to code isn't enough these days, and this podcast is relevant regardless if you live in the USA, UK or New Zealand. The audio quality is great and the calibre of the content is faultless. I highly recommend this podcast. Oh, thank you so much. Also, if you like this podcast, you will like Homestyle Green, and I have a feeling that this all came from Matthew Cutler-Welsh, who is the host of that show, saying, well, if you listen to all of my podcast series, why don't you go and check out Ben? So thank you, Matthew, for sending James our way. And we do the reverse. If you've got up to date on what we're doing, go and check out Matthew on Homestyle Green. And there's one more as well. This one I think is genuinely from the United States. Well-presented research is what Izzy Cool says. I actually dread the day when Ben builds his house. I love hearing about all the different options. And that's it. That's the review. Short and sweet. Izzy, let me just say this, that I have a master plan so that once I've completed my house, there's lots more we can do. We're just beginning here. That's what this is all about. I did want to say at this point that I feel slightly guilty, and I know I may have said this a few episodes back. I'm trying to get more interviews from around the world, but I am a quality geek, and what that means is I'm trying to work around a way of making sure that I can maintain the quality, and that means sending microphones all around the world. That's my issue. Don't need to know about that. Ken Levinson, who was on episode 64, he's given me some great leads, and I'm going to follow them up. But I just haven't had a chance. The focus has all been about the documentary. So I just wanted to say this here, that we're looking to incorporate more interviews from around the world, interesting projects, etc. for next year, 2050. My call to action goes back to the documentary, and that is please share a tweet or a Facebook post about the premiere of our documentary. You can use one that we've crafted ourselves, or take the link from today's show notes at houseplanninghelp.com/79. Or just write your own, be creative. We'd love some more people to come along. Next time, I'm going to be chatting to Paul Jennings from Aldas. As one of our core experts for the documentary, he's a specialist in air leakage. He's also been on the podcast before. We're going to be chatting through some of the buildings that we've tested and seen as part of this documentary. And I thought that would be a good idea because for the video documentary, things have to move quite quickly, and we're trying to keep it so that it'll appeal to a fairly broad audience. But I know you guys can take more, and I have more questions that I want to ask. So we'll bring him back on next time. That's it. I'm done. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch up next time. Cheers.